I would like to be of the aristocracy,
If you had any
woman.
wealth, yeah. Or to be widowed.
Oh God, to be widowed. To be widowed at this time to a wealthy duke. Yes, please. I'm Dr. Ellie Crookes. I'm a lecturer in English literature.
I am Dr. Gunaydin, and I'm a lecturer in politics.
And today we are, as historians, reacting to Bridgerton.
Miss Dolores Stowell.
This is the Debutante Ball, and that is actually Queen Charlotte's
Miss Clara
thing.
Livingston.
Shall I fetch your refreshment, Your Majesty?
Perhaps a casket. The lack of interest here today shall usher me to an early grave.
So this idea of the debutante being presented to a monarch had been around for centuries, but the idea that there would be a set time where a kind of a season, that is Queen Charlotte. She actually started that. What makes me laugh is that she would have been stood next to a cake.
Yeah.
She had this massive cake that she would stand next to, and they would kind of promenade past her and curtsy. Curtsies became really popular at this time, really important. Wearing their white dresses, which was kind of a symbol of purity, but also the fact that they are able to wear white, which was hard to manufacture. It was hard to keep clean, so it's a sign of kind of wealth, nobility.
One thing that I would say is that it doesn't seem like there is much historical evidence around the use of that word debutante. So I think that became more of a term post 1820s, and debutante typically would have referred to a woman who was kind of coming out as an actress or a performer or kind of being on stage.
We don't necessarily know what Queen Charlotte thought of these young women presenting themselves in front of her, kind of rolling her eyes. I don't think that's historically accurate, because these balls were actually fundraising opportunities for her. People would have to pay a lot of money to go to these balls just to kind of kit yourself out to go. But then also you would have to pay to be able to attend, and that payment would go to the charity. So the fact that we have kind of these figures at the top of society, figures that you would have wanted to kind of keep in your good graces.
It's a mutual relationship. She needs to know who they are and treat them with some amount of decorum as well.
She was actually quite meek and mild as a monarch. So I think we're playing into something that's not real.
I finally found her. Lady Whistledown.
Who is she?
She is Madame Delacroix. Madame Delacroix is her.
Well, that certainly is an impressive feat, running two businesses.
Oh, we should both aspire to be just like her. Unmarried, earning our own money.
Look, I'm happy you found her, Elle, but I do not think I can ever be like that.
Whistledown is a woman. Therefore, she has nothing. And still, she writes. You're a man, therefore you have everything. You're able to do whatever you want. So do it. Be bold.
I wonder what Daphne's doing at this very moment.
I'm sure she has many new duties to attend to as Duchess. No things you should be learning yourself to prepare for your debut.
Making a simpering conversation and pretending not to wince every time a man treads on my toes during a waltz.
Always.
I'm no good at those things, Mama. I should only make a fool of myself.
Well, perhaps if you devoted as much time to your deportment lessons as you did to writing in your journal, you might feel rather better.
This is a family that's extremely loving, that obviously does care about preserving their class status, but they've adopted a few kind of more modern norms, say, such as the idea of the love marriage. That's why the mum is always kind of encouraging everyone to definitely find someone. You better get married, but it's okay to love them. So I guess what I mean is maybe she's depicted as a little less strict. And as to the accuracy of that, I think that it, to me, is plausible that families would be fairly loving and permissive. She also reads widely, right? It makes sense to me that she's a firebrand, because this era had many kind of what we would call, and probably even identified as then, as kind of women's liberationists or feminist women who did run businesses, go against the grain. So I think Eloise as a person is extremely possible. It does get very dangerous for her, though, to continue to hold these views, as we see in season 2. It does almost compromise her reputation that she is pursuing these unconventional beliefs. So I do think that maybe it would be hard to have been someone like Eloise, but I think there probably would have been plenty of Eloises in the world.
I go to Mary Wollstonecraft and A Vindication of the Rights of Women, published in 1792, I think. So late 18th century, this is early 19th, there is this misconception that Mary Wollstonecraft, this who we often call this kind of proto-feminist figure, that she was reviled, and that's just not the case. Her ideas very much aligned with many other social reformers of the time, men and women.
Her husband, right?
Such as her husband, William Godwin. I mean, in some families, Eloise would have been kind of shunned, but by and large, there was a sense that women were supposed to be cultured. They were supposed to know different languages and to be able to sing and play the piano. There are radical elements to her, but I don't think that, again, this kind of idea of the black and white of history, and women should be this and they were like this, and if they weren't exactly like that, they would have kind of fallen from grace. And I just think that more nuance needs to be brought.
My mother had 5 boys, took this every time, except for when she had me.
Oh, go on. Drink. You cannot be in earnest. It smells of, rotted egg.
Do not be so ridiculous. You both wish to have a boy, yes?
You might feel a little pressure in the belly.
The explicit intention of that drink is to, as they say, to have a boy, which has to do with the fact that otherwise they will have their property entailed away from them, so they need to keep a male heir in the family, which is not the same thing as saying that people only ever wanted boys. I think certainly people wanted a boy as their first child or as quickly as possible in order to shore everything up in terms of the family line. But I worry sometimes if these shows can overstate how superfluous girl babies would have been deemed. Sometimes mothers did actually want a girl to provide companionship for them, and sometimes they were disappointed if they had a boy. The idea that a boy is a premium kind of baby to have almost overstates the sexism of the era, but I understand why they clearly do want a boy.
In this situation, yeah. Simultaneously, one of the most popular books of this era was Aristotle's masterpiece, which was this book that purported to have been written by Aristotle, which kind of said, oh, this is what a woman needed to do to get pregnant, this is what you needed to do to have a boy, this is what you need to do to be healthy, this is blah, 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 blah. So we did have kind of wives' tales going to Bath and going and using and kind of taking the waters, which was very popular in the late 18th century. Towards the 19th century, we were moving towards going to Brighton and going to the seaside because salt water is what was the thing. There was this strand of kind of women's ideas and kind of pseudoscience that was kind of then on like the
it's
same
the
track.
The modern wellness industry is very similar,
Absolutely.
right? Like,
so yes, people would have been taking tonics. They would have been going to Bath. They would have been going to the seaside. But they also would have been reading these books by purported physicians.
I know someone. This child.
Is it your mama? She's not advanced in age? I suppose your father should still want a boy.
It's not my mama. It is a maid.
Which one of your maids is married?
She's not married.
How did she become a child if she's not married?
I do not know.
I think I'm going to call bull on this one. I know it's clearly season 1. And I acknowledge that they're a little younger and maybe less canny than they are by the time that season 3 rolls around. But the reason I find it really hard to believe is A, because what you just said about the fact that people were accessing these kinds of guidebooks and materials that would have talked about sex, but also these 2 particular characters read so much. Eloise literally mentions that she's reading one of Jane Austen's novels in season 3, and Austen was a writer of the time who would make jokes about sex. And also, if any of these people have ever been around animals or read the Bible, it's very clear. Maybe some other details would have been less understood. But I just want to check in with you and see if you kind of agree with that or if you think this is plausible.
I mean, these are members of the aristocracy, so they wouldn't have had the same access to kind of farmyard animals having sex. It's so as kind of working class, rural.
But they also read books.
But they read
about
books.
Nature and kind of those natural sciences texts that were coming out.
And women
later
talk.
on. Right.
Women talk. I mean, if we're talking about kind of these tinctures that are being made to induce pregnancy, it doesn't fly for me, this idea that women didn't understand how sex connected to pregnancy
and marriage. And it's especially weird because she's like, isn't your mum a bit old to be pregnant? Which doesn't that imply that she knows what menopause is?
Yeah.
So I think there's some issues with writing there as well.
Yeah.
Pen.
Colin, what are you doing out here?
I'm just getting some fresh air. Why are you leaving so soon? Especially in such a charming dress.
Do not mock me, please.
Mock you? I assure you I'm quite serious. The colour rather suits you.
Good night, Mr. Bridgerton.
Do you not need a chaperone?
Spinsters do not need chaperones.
You are not a spinster.
I'm in my 3rd year on the marriage mark with no prospects to show for it. What would you call that?
She brings so much of the pain and rage and the pressure that women would have genuinely been feeling. In her case, she's in her 3rd year of the kind of these seasons that happen where these kind of elites descend upon London and try to find a partner. That was a very real thing, and it would start maybe around 17, and it did look really great for you if you were able to find a partner in your 1st season on the market, although not uncommon to find one in the 2nd or the 3rd. So Penelope is kind of capturing something about the pressure she would have been feeling to be maybe 19-ish, 20 I think, here, and still not have a prospect for a partner. And so that's why she kind of snaps at him. Spinsters don't need chaperones. So it was very important at this time for these girls to be chaperones, so either with, say, a maid, as they depict in the show, or a relative. There were extremely rigid rules around chaperoning. The fact that they are together alone is notable, not good, especially in the dark, alone at nighttime. That's when these sordid things happen, right? But it's even weird that they're even friends. I think that's a bit of like an anachronism. So she says to him, spinsters don't need chaperones because it's true that once it was accepted that you were unlikely to find a match and to marry, you kind of entered that category of on-the-shelf, unwed person. And so it didn't matter if you were still a virgin or not, because you weren't getting married, the whole wealth thing doesn't matter anymore. So that's why she says, spinsters don't need chaperones, and I understand the pain that she's feeling, but not all hope is lost. I mean, Austen does depict women in their mid-20s, even up until their late 20s, who do find matches, but clearly feeling a lot of pain and pressure in that moment.
Absolutely. And I mean, they were going on the marriage market around the age of 17, but they by and large weren't getting married until their early 20s, late teens.
Courtships were long, right? And involved massive letter writing campaigns and negotiations.
And that's where we got all the nice letters from. I mean,
all the love bombing letters, because men had to be so effusive with the letters, like, pick me, pick me, pick me.
Byron's letters. Byron's, if you're going to read any letters of this time, read Lord Byron's letters. They are ridiculous. We have this sense that women married much younger than they did. That isn't historically true. Unless you were kind of the monarchy, where it was about kind of creating links between...
Yeah, totally.
You would marry someone off at 15, 16, but you would go on the marriage market, you would find a suitor, and then you would become engaged, and that means that you could actually write letters to each other and kind of have a courtship. But spinster is kind of 25, 26. There are different names.
And that is the age at which the chaperoning rules became much more lax.
Yeah, and as you got on, they had different names for different classifications of women.
Super spinster, mega spinster.
Mega spinster.
The most spinstery spinster.
When Eloise kind of says, I want to be a spinster, I completely get it. I mean, if I were around in this period, I think I would like to be of the aristocracy,
if you had any
woman.
wealth,
Hopefully I have kind of benevolent brothers. That's the thing. You want to have kind of...
Or to be widowed.
Or to be widowed. Yeah. Oh, God, to be widowed. To be widowed at this time to a wealthy duke. Yes, please.
Oh, would you prefer to be promenading with your fellow debutantes?
Would you like to watch grass grow? And it is not me they are eyeing.
I don't understand the limits of your...
First of all, I'm thinking about parks. So parks didn't exist until this time. The first landscape designers designing parks for people to walk through, a safe place for people to kind of show off their wealth, their beauty, their prospects.
And to have respite maybe from the kind of growing industrializations.
Yeah.
You know, London was otherwise kind of quite disgusting in many working class places.
Yeah, absolutely. It was this space of kind of cultivated,
controlled as
yeah,
well,
controlled, and which is a perfect kind of analogy for what was going on here, because it's supposed to be kind of doing what comes naturally, which is kind of heterosexual love matches,
right?
And kind of
it's the leisure class.
Yeah, but you are doing so in an environment that is inherently kind
staged
and cultivated. In the Victorian era, the promenading was moved from just in kind of these cultivated parklands to strands. So if you go to Melbourne or Sydney, there are strands where you would walk through. Those places were meant to be promenaded through. You would show yourself off, you would show off your wealth, your beauty, and you would hope that you would attract interest.
Which is the modern day prom, right?
Yes,
it's kind of
absolutely.
The shortening
Yeah.
We still have some of these practices. If you ever go hang out somewhere at night and hope to meet someone, you are
absolutely. Yeah. You're promenading. And it kind of still happens. It's about kind of showing the wares.
Yeah, and manufacturing opportunities, you know, prior to the dating app. How do you meet other people? You have to manufacture opportunities to encounter and also take a little bit of like a sticky beak and a looky-loo and go like, I like that one. But typically you wouldn't actually be interacting unless you had previously already been introduced, like in a mixed gender setting. So the fact that Colin runs up to Penelope again is really quite, I think, maybe not so true to history, but especially being repeatedly seen with the same man is really quite
absolutely.
Bad
You couldn't dance more than twice with the same person because then you were officially engaged.
Yeah, so
there's no way.
They weren't freely moving around like this. I think it was more looking and seeing, but I think, you know, this kind of what is real is the park, the idea of going to a Hyde Park, say, or the Vauxhall Gardens or other pleasure gardens that were erected. Kind of wild green spaces were really fading away, and instead we had these heavily curated, landscaped spaces for wealthy people to run amok in. I think the most popular time was kind of between 5 and 6 p.m. After that, it got, I think, maybe a little bit more sketchy.
Oh, yes. That's when the courtesans would come out that would kind of tap you on the shoulder and kind of,
Yeah, so like different vibes for the day. And then the only other thing I'm noticing is that she has this muff.
Oh, it's because she broke her arm.
Because she has a broken wrist. But it's horrible. And it's summer, right? It's kind of not weather appropriate for her to be carrying around a muff.
I think that undergirding this, for me, watching this, and watching any work that is representing the past, is it's fun to look for anachronism. It's fun to look for what isn't historically accurate and kind of say, oh, in the medieval, they didn't have forks. They went dancing to Taylor Swift.
Right.
And it's fun to talk about these things, and it makes you kind of feel smart. Finding the bits that reveal something about us as a culture.
And are emotionally true, maybe.
And emotionally true. Yeah. This idea of what is constant, what is something about kind of the immutability of human nature, about love, about culture, about society, about sex. That's interesting to me. And what does it reveal about our ideas of race, of gender, of whatever? That we can have a story that is nominally about erotic love between hot people being hot, but what is being kind of presented if at the very top, the very highest echelon of this world, this fantasy world, is a black woman, and how that is kind of allowing us as a culture to forget what kind of undergirded the Regency era, but what continues to underpin our times.
To that end, you can draw a straight line between this era, this historical era, and our kind of present one.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for watching. The University of Wollongong has many, many experts available to talk about all kinds of different topics, so let us know what you want to see next.